I never believed in coincidences, much less in Christmas accidents. Dramas are planned, prepared, like fine cuisine. You gather the ingredients, you set the thermostat. That evening, my daughter Sophie had set hers to the usual bourgeois insipidity: an oversized Christmas tree, an overly dry turkey, and the crushing presence of my son-in-law, Mark. The house was not a home, but a gilded trap. For years, I had seen it as a glass cage where smiles were calibrated and intentions were always vitiated. Mark, a 45-year-old CEO, whose only skill was appearing indispensable, had reached the point of no return of his arrogance. He had married Sophie for prestige, not for love, and he no longer saw me. He saw an obstacle, an old safe that held the share of the fortune which, he believed, was rightfully his. It wasn't just about liquid cash, but the majority stake in the communications company that my late husband had built with the help of Anna, Mark's mother, before the two businesses took different paths. The history was a spiderweb of financial betrayals that Mark was determined to conclude. My body, that afternoon, felt surprisingly light, disengaged from gravity by anticipation. My hands were clad in fine leather. They barely trembled. I had spent the last 6 weeks establishing the logistics. I had studied the room's blueprints, the flow of guests, and crucially, the exact angle where the walnut dresser stood relative to the corner office where Mark held his late-night meetings. The friction point of the evening was, as always, the symbol, my armchair, the place of the matriarch, at the end of the indecently polished mahogany. A throne. Mark needed that seat for his announcement, not a simple greeting announcement, but a subtle declaration of power seizure within the family. He wanted every member, every distant cousin, every distracted listener to see him at the center. He was appropriating physical space to validate his grip on the financial space. My phone, an antique black model that I had kept precisely because its microphone was analog and incredibly sensitive, was my only accomplice. I had placed it on the walnut dresser, next to a pile of greeting cards, 15 minutes before entering the dining room. The voice recording app was active, set to a directional sound isolation mode. I was not waiting for a fall. I was waiting for the confession. I knew that, fueled by alcohol and the euphoria of his own cunning, Mark would confide in his contact across the festive table. The guests flocked in. The sound of forced laughter, the clinking of crystal, the sanitized Christmas music. The time came to sit down. I headed toward my armchair with the slowness of a queen who knows her court is plotting. Mark stood in front of me, blocking my path. He wore that smooth smile, that veneer of superiority he learned in leadership seminars, the kind of smile you are given before they ask for your kidney. "Mother, if you would just sit there for sheer convenience?" he asked, pointing to an uncomfortable stool near the kitchens, a place reserved for minor roles. "It's for your own good. Service will be easier." "It is my place, Mark. My back is fragile. Custom demands it. And custom at Christmas is what remains of order." "Order?" he exclaimed with a dry laugh that did not reach his eyes. "Custom is a crutch for the weak, Heloise. Tonight, I need a strong presence at the head, a presence capable of making decisions." He never used my first name. It was a warning shot. He had crossed the line of superficial filial respect. I sighed, playing the stubborn old woman. His impatience turned into violent irritation. He thought he could will me away by the sheer weight of his dominance. He saw me as a movable piece of furniture. Secrets need to be heard to be real. They need silent witnesses. What you are about to see is what money and pride can turn into violence, a violence that is the very signature of the coward. But what you are about to hear is not just the sound of the fall. It is the end of his reign. If you want the continuation, if you want to see the execution of my vengeance, if you want to know the complete story and the fate of the powerful, then subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of the evidence that this technology has allowed us to unearth. This is the only guarantee you'll get all the pieces. The air drained of oxygen. He raised his hands. I expected a simple shove to move me aside. I was wrong. Mark was beyond mere impatience. He was in predator mode, clearing the field. He wanted public humiliation, a silent demonstration of his authority. My son-in-law shoved me to the floor to get his seat at the Christmas table. The shove was dry, brutal, not an accident, but an expulsion. I fell, my head nearly hitting the corner of the sideboard. The shock was not the sound of my hip hitting the old floorboards. The pain was sharp, throbbing, but it was only secondary. The shock was the absence of any humanity in his gaze. It was the eye of a shark, empty of thought, focused solely on the objective. Chaos erupted in the room. Sophie screamed Mark's name, a high note swallowed by the confusion. Cousins stood up, chairs scraped the floor. A broken champagne flute added a crystalline, menacing note to the uproar. The chandelier light began to spin. I stayed there, lying down, breathing in the scent of beeswax, roasted turkey, and panic. I had prepared for the fall. I had even adjusted my fall to avoid serious injury. But the coldness of the act stunned me for a moment. And Mark? He took the final step. He walked around my body on the floor, as one avoids a bag of garbage. He sat heavily in my armchair. He adjusted his gold cufflink, pushing back the wrist of his shirt. It was a perfect, complete gesture of dominance. The phone's microphone, 10 feet away on the dresser, captured the sudden silence of my breathing, because I had forced myself to hold my breath and Sophie's choked cries. And then Mark's voice, clear and low, addressing not the crowd but himself, believing the commotion covered his words. The recorder, set to isolate nearby vocal frequencies, captured it with chilling clarity. Finally, it's the only way to maintain order. Order, his order, the order of the new king. I let Sophie, pale and shaking, and my grandson Thomas carry me to the sofa. I played the role of the dignified, bruised victim, accepting pillows and a blanket. My mind, however, was already at work, inside the dresser. The physical assault was proven. But that was just the prelude. It was the proof of the financial assault I had come to find. Later, around midnight, the house fell into the heavy silence of sleep and too much champagne. Mark remained downstairs, in the adjacent living room, ostentatiously playing the host with the last few guests, his professional laptop open on the corner desk. It was the perfect spot. He felt secure, untouchable. I waited another hour. I retrieved the phone. I put on my in-ear headphones, the only technology that truly matters in war, discreet listening. I scrolled through the track, returning to 9:45 p.m. The shock of my fall was a sound spike, a wave of distant echoes. And then, Mark's voice, his low voice of confession, and the relative silence. It was after the commotion that Mark, believing the room empty of attentive ears, reconnected with his contact. I found the black gold. An 18-minute conversation with someone named the Duck, a cryptid contact likely abroad. My phone's microphone, amplifying the reverberation from the adjacent room, had captured their exchange with astonishing clarity. The words were nuggets of guilt. Mark's voice, recorded. Yes, it's locked down. I used the leverage on the dead assets, the pension funds you ignored. When Anna returns from Iceland, the merger will be consumed. No one can stop it. I pushed for the signing on the 24th because I knew she'd be off-grid, focused on her foundation. She's distracted. She won't check anything before the money transfers at dawn on the 26th. The duck, recorded metallic, filtered voice. The internal audit figures are solid, Mark. The commission won't notice anything. Mark, recorded. Falsified, of course. Perfectly, but credible. I injected false gains into the foreign subsidiaries. She'll believe her dear son is a financial genius, not a thief. The manipulation is undetectable without a level 3 forensic analysis. The duck, recorded. And the old woman, Heloise. What about her remaining shares? Mark, recorded. She's old. She doesn't understand mergers, only the dividends she gets every quarter. She's part of the decor, a decorative memory. I'll take care of her later. Once the entity is under my total control, I'll have her bought out by a shell company at a rock-bottom price. She won't have time to react. I took off my headphones. The crime was complete, both professional and filial. He had sold me out, both me and his mother-in-law. The contempt was absolute. The hour of retaliation had come. I didn't need a lawyer for this part. Not yet. My son-in-law's enemy was not me. It was his own mother, Anna. Anna, the CEO. The woman who had built this empire brick by brick, who had sacrificed her personal life for the board. She was a lioness, protecting her business. Anna would never forgive fraud, jeopardizing the company she founded decades ago. The loss of personal control, to her, was worse than death. I found Anna's satellite phone number. It was kept in a hidden notebook Mark was unaware of, a legacy from my late husband. I worked by the flickering light of a candle, my phone screen the only source of modern electricity. I cut the audio file. I isolated the 18-minute conversation about the fraud, the audit falsification, and the acknowledgement of the December 24th deadline. I encrypted everything, using an algorithm my husband had taught me, ensuring that only Anna could access it with the key I would provide. I added as a preamble Mark's whisper about order as a signature of his arrogance. The hardest part was the transfer. The country networks were slow and congested with Christmas wishes. I launched the transfer to Anna's satellite through a slow but untraceable VPN, my phone's indicator light blinking red in the darkness. I named the file Urgence, 24 Décembre, Proof of Fraud, Your Son. The estimated time was 3 hours. I had to sit still, my back burning with pain, but my focus riveted on the progress bar. Each percent was 1 second less in Mark's reign. I finished the transfer at 5:17 a.m. I didn't sleep. I disabled the VPN and erased the transfer history from my phone. I put the device back on the dresser, innocent as a prayer book. Christmas morning was the most delightful wait of my life. Mark came downstairs at 8:30 a.m., fresh, shaved, playing the casual businessman, insolent confidence in his stride. "Mother, are you all right? I hope you slept well after last night's fuss. I feel terribly bad about what happened. I think I was just tired." "I am better, Mark. The truth always finds its way in the early morning, and some people's insomnia is others' pleasure." He shrugged, dismissing my words as the ramblings of an old woman. He poured himself a fresh glass of orange juice. That's when Mark's professional phone, a titanium device resting on the counter, began to vibrate. Not a simple message, a hammering, incessant, a discreet, but repeated, ringing. He grabbed the device, initially annoyed by the disturbance. Horror swept away the irritation in a split second. His complexion turned grey, his lips dried. He held the phone as if it were a snake. He had 47 missed calls. The scroll of numbers was a symphony of disaster. First, his company's head of legal affairs. Then, the board members. And at the top of the list, the most dreaded name, Anna, his mother. The name was displayed in capital letters, repeated dozens of times in the history. His plan had collapsed between the moment I clicked send and the moment the sun rose on Christmas. Anna's satellite had received it. She had opened it, and the sky had fallen on her head. It wasn't my lawyer who was claiming everything from him. It was his mother. Mark, his face distorted, looked at my phone, then at my face. He understood. What did you send? He said, his voice now just a hiss, a fragile leak of air, a threat so weak that the slightest movement could extinguish it. I took the time to savor my coffee, the rich, bitter taste of triumph. I simply provided your mother with what you were trying to hide from her, Mark. I sent a Christmas gift a little early. She received the file in time, on her satellite in Iceland, at 5:17 a.m. Those 47 calls are not Christmas wishes, my son-in-law. They are the sirens of your downfall. She knows you manipulated the figures to take her place. And Anna won't send you to prison. She will drain you. She will take away your name, your reputation, and she will leave you just enough to remember that you tried to betray her. Mark dropped the phone, which slid onto the marble with a dull thump. He walked out of the kitchen like a ghost, the most powerful man in the room, now the weakest. I stood up. The pain in my hip was still there, but it was just a trophy. I picked up my cane. Merry Christmas, Mark. The seat at the top is always fragile, especially when you forget that the microphone is listening. Control is restored. Technology served as a silent witness, and Mark's arrogance condemned him. But there are always other stories whispering in the shadow of power, family secrets ready to explode. If you have been captivated by this story of justice and psychological thriller until the very end, don't stay on the periphery. Subscribe now and join our community. See you very soon for the next truth unearthed.